Good day, everyone. No, see, this is J.R. Goles from Garment Gen. So, I'm here to discuss to you about who wrote Genesis chapter one. So, many of the Bible scholars are having dispute and speculation about this first chapter of the Bible. No, so most of the Jews recognize Moses as the author of the five books of the Old Testament, which they called it Pentateuch or Torah. So, but if you look at in the story of Moses, Moses was born on the time of Exodus, so he could not be probably the person who wrote Genesis chapter 1. So, but before I discuss to you about kaning this who wrote Genesis 1:1, let's discuss about the evolution of writing. First, the evolution of writing and how the Bible could be possibly written. So, number one is the tools for writing. So, in the first 21st century, we are more on digital writing. So, we are writing to our website, our blog posts, so inana. But in the past times, so they are using different kind of tools for writing. So the number one is the tokens or the symbols. So the first ever recorded in the history, they first used tokens and symbols. You can see in the pictures the sample of tokens. These were a kind of idea of things and the records that they have. No, these were codes that most accepted of their times. For example, one sack of grain, ni utang ka na kog one sack of grain. So maybe they put just circle in the round tablet or clay tablet, that like just like that. So number two, the form of the tools for writing was number two is uh, cuneiform. So cuneiform was the earliest system of writing invented by the Sumerians in the ancient Mesopotamia. So you can check it to Wikipedia. So in Genesis chapter 11, God confounded the language of the people at the time, no? Because they were one language since their first father is Adam. So the language that Adam used, it he passed it through all generation, and all of the people at that time were one language. So God said, replenish the earth, go to the world and multiply. That's the commandment of God. But these people were in the certain place which is called land of Shinar. So there they built a kaning Tower of Babel, so they can reach the heavens. And God saw it, and they went down and confounded the language. So according to Kent Holben, there were 42 families in that time and languages created in that moment. So when God confounded, um, there were 42 languages that created at the time, including maybe Chinese, a lot of one, at our language as a Filipino, so baybayin or ingana. But this were the original languages that happened at that time. So karon we have a lot of languages, especially in the Philippines. I think we have more than 100 languages that are here, no? But in this time, they use cuneiform to understand each other. So there's no use of alphabet on their time because they understand each other and the idea of things. But in this time, they do not understand each families that has different language. So they use cuneiform to understand certain things or the idea of things. Number three is the pictograms. This time, um, people now used writings, including the pictures. So the popular place for this is kaning ancient Egypt. So they like to put the picture of Pharaoh, the head of Pharaoh, and their known letters. So number four is the phonograms, which in this time Moses uh, uh, have the na-educate siya dito sa land of Egypt, and then this phonograms is taken from the pictograms of the Egyptians and then translated it to the same idea, but it's now like a letters now. So, so that's why ang Hebrew, ang Egyptian hieroglyphics is it's like the same. Because Moses was the first one who translated Genesis, all of the book of Genesis to his known language. So number one is the tools for writing, and number two is the eyewitnesses. So who wrote Genesis 1:1, chapter 1 now? Before I answer that, every time the words of the Bible is written, there always have a eyewitnesses. So all of these 40 authors were eyewitnesses of the certain events that they wrote in the Bible. So a lot of new writers in the New Testament were quoted the Old Testament writings, which we call it is as a cross references. So number one is the tools for writing, number two is the eyewitnesses, and number three is the storytelling. So we like stories, no? God knows that we like stories, so that's why almost all of the books of the Bible were written in like a storytelling. So most of the authors, including David, Samuel, Moses also, the form of writing they are using is like they are telling a story. So most of us right now reject the Bible as true because of how it was written, like a storytelling. So we know most of the stories were not true, especially if our first educator was our television. So in spite of that, God still ordered the writers to write the Bible as like telling a story. So who wrote Genesis chapter 1? So there were no eyewitnesses on the time because Adam was created on the sixth day of creation, diba? So the clear answer was God himself. The author of Genesis chapter 1 is God himself. So the God that first appeared in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, which translated into Hebrew word Elohim, which means Elohim in the English transliteration. So God's first name was Elohim. So how could he possibly write it? Remember when God met Moses in the mountain of Sinai, diba? He wrote in his finger the 10 commandments and gave it to Moses. So it's not impossible for men. It's impossible for God. It's possible. Walay butang nga dili mabuhat sa Ginoo. So how could he preserve it? So he probably gave it to Adam. Then Adam passed it through all generations until it arrived to Moses. No, ingana. Probably God did not write it down, but he told it to Adam, and Adam wrote it down to a clay tablet and preserved it until it arrived to Adam. But that is only a theory. The fact that the Bible, the Genesis chapter 1 is there, it arrived to the certain place where it could be, diba? So in the conclusion, God preserved and inspired his word forever. According to Psalm 12 verse number 6 to 7, the words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in the furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. Logical thinking will say, that can't be, no? Archaeologists says, we must find an evidence. Scientists say, we must experience it. But you don't need that to prove if God is true or not. What God needs to us is faith to him and to his word. I think that's all for today. Thank you and God bless. This is Jer Goles from Garmin Chen. Salamat.